question.
Hi everyone. I'm so glad you came back for our second session. We had a seemed like a really great group last week, and I enjoyed hearing everyone's stories. Um, this week I kind of wanted to start it off with a topic in regards to if you reflected on your hospitalization, if you could think of a high and a good communication or interaction you had with a medical professional or also your low or your negative experience that you might have had. I myself am a nurse, so it's not to offend any like healthcare workers, but I just kind of thought that this was a really good topic.
And before we get started talking about the topic, I just wanted to remind everyone of, the ground rules for this group. As a reminder, I'm Kendra. I'm a psychologist, and I'm just here to help jump in as needed. And we had kind of last time talked together a little bit about, the ground rules that we thought would be important for this call. And I think one of the key ones is confidentiality. And as a reminder, that means that, what we talk about in this group stays in this group. If you want to talk to other people about kind of some of the general themes that come up, that's okay. But you wouldn't want to say, Tina said this very specific thing. We want to keep it pretty general just to protect everyone's confidentiality. And we were going to make sure that everyone is respectful of each other. And also that, you can share as much or as little as you like. There's not a lot of pressure to share things if you don't feel comfortable sharing. Did anyone have any additional questions, thoughts about those ground rules, or any ground rules that they, that came to their mind after the last meeting that they thought would be important to include that we didn't decide to add?
I think just one more thing, if you're not talking, if you could go on mute so we don't get any background noise, everyone's home. And also, just in terms of if you need to leave or excuse yourself, if anything's too intense, that is definitely okay. And one of us will reach out after and follow up if that's what needs to happen. I guess I could start just to kind of make everyone a little more comfortable. I guess let's maybe start with the lows so that we could end with a high. I just remember during my time in the ICU, I found it really, really difficult because even when I was sedated, I was sometimes like in and out of like twilight, and I felt like no one ever really acknowledged me present, and everyone talked around me or about me and my medical condition, and no one really spoke to me, which I found really, really challenging. So I don't know if anyone else could relate to that or they have something else they'd want to add.
I can relate, Sarah. I didn't remember a lot. Um, what's hard for me is that I was married at the time, and I know they were updating my husband, which is, hard to talk about because I don't know if I shared last week, but we are recently divorced. But it was as if I wasn't alive or a person anymore, and that he got the updates even when I became more alert. I wasn't included.
Yeah, that's I can relate definitely to that. And I'm sorry about, the divorce, and it has a big impact, like a hospitalization on, you know, family, friends, your whole world just changes.
I can share. I guess it's kind of similar. I felt like, after I was out of the ICU, I dealt with like a lot of confusion and like delirium and false memories, and people would talk to me, but I just felt like they just thought I was kind of crazy, or like they were very dismissive of what I was experiencing, and I knew it was related to what I had been through, but like what I was remembering felt so real to me, and everybody kept telling me it wasn't, but I just felt like they never had a conversation about what that experience was like. They just said, "Oh, that's not true. Like that didn't happen." But I think it would have been helpful to kind of talk through it a little bit. And I just felt like they were reluctant to do that and just were kind of dismissive of like that experience after the ICU and like dealing with all of that.
Yeah, I think that's definitely relatable. I feel like, you know, to feel like you are the patient and the priority, but everyone else is operating as if you really aren't there. I know Mike is with his wife. I don't know if you could relate to anything anyone's saying, Mike.
Well, my experience, I think, was a lot different than yours because both of yours sound, um, or all of your experiences sound very serious. I had the flu, so I was, in the ICU for 4 days. I mean, I have to say, people were talking to me like, "Oh, you're gonna have some issues when you leave the ICU," and talking to my wife about that and kind of scaring her. But I'm 65. I mean, there are just some issues that come along with being 65. So it was more kind of a, pessimistic outlook they were painting when I was just getting out of the hospital. I really didn't need, somebody, telling me I might encounter all these problems. But again, my experience, I think, was very different than what you guys have shared. Yours sounded, far more serious in so many ways.
I'm glad Mike came back this second time because, the group was wonderfully helpful last session. We were able to use it as a starting place to maybe kind of like explore some of, what Mike's hesitancies to go back and to remember and to not be kind of hesitant to just push it all and move forward, because I think that's part of the block here is not recognizing some of the trauma, even though it was short, in order to best in the healthiest way move forward. If there are cognitive little deficits I've noticed, some forgetfulness, maybe part of the trying to block it out in the anxiety. That's my fear, and that's my quest in wanting to be a part with all of you. And I so appreciate, everybody sharing and allowing us to be a part of this, because it's been, I think it has been and will be, I think, very fruitful for us. Thank you, everybody.
I really so appreciate everyone sharing their perspective. And, a few things are jumping out at me, which is, everyone's experience is unique. And it's really important that healthcare providers, recognize that and don't kind of assume what someone's trajectory is going to look like after the ICU. I also kind of hear this a lot where people will compare their own experience to someone else's and think, oh, mine wasn't as bad. But, we can think that this sounds a little dark, but suffering isn't a limited resource, right? Just because we downplay our own suffering doesn't help anyone else. And so I think it's really important to just kind of recognize the pieces of each person's hospitalization that might have been challenging or less challenging. And that can look really different for each person.
I think that's really helpful, Kendra. I appreciate that. I think I mentioned last week that my mom had died after a hospitalization and with like a lot of complications. And not to sound dark, but if we all compared our experience to hers and said, well, we lived, we shouldn't be complaining, I don't know how helpful that would be for our recovery. There's one extreme where unfortunately, like my mom, someone didn't make it, and we all did. But I think even from last week to this week, Mike, I know you're struggling with even labeling some of the things as changes, but I hear a lot of similar experiences. I have difficulty with my memory, and I didn't realize it either. My husband did. And that was part of some of the tension in the relationship. I wasn't seeing the changes. And but anyway, I appreciate what Kendra said about, each of our experiences come with different losses and changes, and sometimes comparing and minimizing isn't. And I think of that with my mom, that I still have challenges even though I'm alive.
Yeah, I hear everything you're saying and it sounds very relatable to Mike, but I feel like Maria got kind of quiet, so I wanted to just check in and see if she could relate to any of this.
Yeah, I guess it's just, I think I mentioned last week, like the accident was 2 years ago, but my husband died in the accident. So it is kind of hard for me to watch Mike be, have such a strong support in his wife and see Jen like advocating for him and just see him not like responding to that and appreciating that because I wish I had that and it just feels kind of unfair that, you know, he has that support and, you know, every relationship is different and I can't judge that, but I wish I had that support. I wish I had my husband alongside of me, you know, cheering me on. So it is like kind of a little bit hard for me to watch that.
Yeah, I understand that. I think you know,
Well, I was just going to cut in and say, I hear what everybody's saying, and it makes a lot of sense. Um, but and especially with what Maria just shared, y- you know, I don't want to feel like a complainer, and maybe I know what everybody experienced is different, and yeah, there are commonalities because we're all in the ICU, but I guess it goes back to not wanting to be seen as a complainer or to sound like one when other people have it much harder. And I think what Maria just said is really true. Even though I don't always agree with my wife, she's there suggesting different things. And again, and just like, I've been able to go back to work, even if I'm, kind of struggling. So again, it just goes back to that business of, not wanting to be a complainer, wanting to be positive, but
Yeah,
that's all.
I can hear that, Mike, that it sounds like that's a really important part of your identity or was before all this happened to like be positive and not be a complainer and just kind of to fight through things. So this is a big shift for you, it sounds like. And Maria, I can totally hear the pain and all the difficult things you've been through. And I'm wondering, as you feel that sadness, have you found things that have like helped you cope with that to deal with these difficult moments?
I did start seeing a therapist and, we have a really strong relationship. I think that would actually be like my high with a medical professional as my therapist has really helped me to pull my way out of a lot of dark feelings and hard places and work through some of what I'm feeling. And that's why, as much as I see this, feel the sadness in seeing Mike and Jen together and her being supportive of him, like I'll feel these feelings, but I know it's something that with the help of my therapist, I'll work through. So I think that's been really helpful for me. But every day is really hard. It's hard to hear about people choosing to be apart. It's hard to see people being supportive of their spouse. It's just marriage is everywhere. And every day I'm reminded of that loss that I experienced. And then on top of it, I have my own issues, both like mental and emotional and physical, coming out of this accident. So not only am I constantly reminded of the loss, but I'm constantly reminded of like what I lost too, physically and mentally. And so I'm just really thankful for my therapist. I think without her, I'd probably struggle a lot more, but that's been my biggest, I guess, source of support. And my family tries, but I just don't feel like they totally understand.
yeah, Maria, I feel like, what you said, that is a really hard thing because, a lot of us have not lost our significant other, spouse, in the same incident. But if we look at like Tina was talking about, she's yes, her husband's still alive, but in a way, she's also grieving the loss of a marriage. So not to say anything's worse or better, but there are ways that maybe we could each help relate in our own way of things we lost. I stepped away from my job. That was a big loss for me. Not trying to compare, but just trying to relate and hope that you don't feel so alone.
That's what I wanted to say too to Maria. I don't think it's the same, and I try not to compare losing a parent or a spouse. And I know divorce is different than a death, but I really appreciated, what you've been sharing and feel a connection to you. And my family doesn't really understand either. And I hope that maybe through this group we can be there for each other, even though there are some differences. Maybe that's what this is for, to come together and feel less alone.
Thanks, Tina.
This is Mike. Maria, I was just wondering, how about your family and your friends? Are there people, not that they step in to be your husband, and not that everybody, has experienced what you've experienced, but do you find that there are other people out there in addition to your therapist? Because obviously therapists can be really big, but in your day-to-day living each week, are there other people?
I mean, a little bit. Like, it's been hard. I was really close with his sister, but obviously she's experiencing a loss of a sibling, so she has her own grief, and the same for his mother. So that, I think, relationship has been a little bit strained because we all are dealing with it differently. And I think I would want us all to recognize that everyone's grief is valid. Kendra, kind of like you said, like, your suffering doesn't take away from somebody else's or make somebody else's life easier. I wish they recognized that. Um, and my friends, they try to be helpful. I think they were really compassionate in the beginning and would try to include me in things. But, we're 35, and a lot of people our age have young kids or, are working a lot. So I think people after, over time just kind of go back to their life and not forget that I can't, but or recognize that my life has changed so drastically. But it's like I'm not their responsibility, so they have to kind of do what they need to do with their families and their work. And sometimes I feel like I've just kind of gotten left behind. Um, I have a couple close friends that will reach out and include me in things, but I think that's been an adjustment too, is feeling like my life kind of stopped on the day of the accident and everybody else's life kind of kept going. And I kind of feel like I get left behind.
Did you ever consider going to one of the groups for, bereavement, like a widow or widowers group? To just meet other people, discuss with other people kind of what you're feeling?
Yeah, my therapist has brought that up a few times, and I think maybe it would be something I pursue at some point. I don't know if I'm there yet, but maybe,
Yeah.
especially like seeing how this group goes, and I think group work can be kind of intimidating. So this is a good start for me. I think if I can kind of heal some of my inner wounds with my own accident and experience, maybe I'll be more open to talking about losing my husband, because I feel like that's the harder piece of all of this for me. Is I'll deal with whatever I have to deal with physically and mentally, but the loss of him just feels so much worse. So maybe I'll get there.
That being said, Maria, I want to just say that I appreciate how much courage it took for you to step outside and to bring that to the very painful part of yourself to the group. And I think that's really what makes a group so powerful and so enriched, is when people can take that step. And as soon as you spoke up, my heart just kind of did a little bit of a elevation, not for your pain, but for your braveness and for, who you are as a person, and, to be able to be a part of, what hopefully will be healing for all of us, myself, you know, included.
Yeah,
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
I want to echo that statement that I think everyone here has been so wonderfully vulnerable and sharing things that are really hard to talk about. And I think Maria and Mike, you both brought up something really important, which is, often you'll have people in your life who want to support you, but they don't always know how to do that. And so sometimes you kind of have to tell people what you need because they might be trying to do something, but they're doing the exact opposite of the thing that's going to be most helpful. And so I'm wondering, have you all tried that to kind of tell the people in your life what you need? Is that something that you've had experience with? How has that gone?
I learned that with my mom, because again, it's a different relationship. I had just turned 40 when she died, and people had said the same thing of like, go to a bereavement group. And I think groups like that can be helpful, but I was a lot younger than everybody else. So I had a difficult time relating. Um, but it did get to the point with some family and friends between her death and even the divorce. And then a lot of people keep telling me to just find a different job. I can't go back to the work that I was doing. They give a lot of advice that I'm not necessarily looking for from them, to just go find a different career. Like that's an easy thing to do. So I've kind of learned to say I appreciate that they're trying to help, but that's not the help I need right now, and give them some suggestions. But that took a lot of time, and some relationships fizzled out because I either couldn't or I tried and they didn't change. Um, Wanting to kind of control things or give that advice that I hadn't asked for.
I think, you know, just for the sake of time, just looking at it and hearing what everyone's saying, it almost seems like we should pause here and like pick up next week in terms of like advocating for our needs and, trying to help people understand what we need versus being told what we need. I feel like I'm hearing that a lot. I don't know. Yeah, Tina's shaking, everyone's shaking their head. Okay. And Kendra, what do you think about that? Does that sound
Yeah.
like a good starting point?
Yeah, that sounds like a great idea, I think. Yeah, like Dina was saying, when you go through something like this, there are a lot of changes that happen in your network, and you can realize that, there's some people who are really in your corner that you thought were, and maybe some people who just like that, those relationships don't fit anymore. So I think this would be a great thing to keep talking about at our next meeting. So it was really wonderful to see everyone. Thanks so much for all your wonderful participation. I hope this was helpful, and, I encourage you to take care of yourself after this meeting, because a lot of heavy stuff got brought up. There might be some emotions, so just make sure to take some time to decompress and do the things that will help restore you.
Thank you.
Thank you.